There comes a point in the healing process when you begin to notice something subtle, something easily overlooked yet deeply transformative. It's not always a loud shift. Often, it's more like a quiet realignment, like a river changing course, not in a dramatic flood, but gradually, day by day. One of the first and most profound signs that you are healing through integration is the way you start to relate to your emotions. For a long time, emotions might have felt like unpredictable visitors, crashing through your inner world without warning, demanding attention, disrupting your peace. Anger may have surged like a storm, fear may have frozen you in place, grief may have swallowed your days in grey silence. These emotional states weren't simply feelings, they were whole identities that took over, leaving you feeling powerless or scattered. But now, there's a noticeable difference. Instead of being swept away by the emotional tide, you find yourself standing on the shore watching the waves roll in. You feel them, yes, you feel everything, but you are no longer possessed by them. This is not because the emotions have weakened or disappeared. Rather, it is because you have become stronger, more centered, more whole. Integration does not eliminate your emotions, it changes your relationship with them. You are no longer at war with yourself. That anger you once tried to suppress or feared would destroy everything, you now hear it, and it teaches you. It tells you where you've been wronged, where your boundaries were crossed, where your dignity needs defending. The fear that once paralyzed you, it still visits, but now you listen. You ask it what it's trying to protect, and grief, deep, aching grief, no longer isolates you in darkness. It becomes a bridge, connecting you to what matters, to love, to memory, to meaning. You begin to regulate your emotions not by controlling them, but by understanding them. You notice the subtle space between stimulus and response. A harsh comment doesn't immediately trigger a defensive outburst. A disappointment no longer leads to collapse. Instead, there's a pause. In that pause, something sacred happens. You choose. You begin to choose how to respond. That space of choice is born from integration, from the reunification of the parts of yourself that once acted alone, isolated in pain or confusion. This new capacity to feel without drowning is not a trick of the intellect. It is not achieved through suppression or numbing. It is not cold detachment. Quite the opposite. It is intimacy with your inner world. You are feeling more, not less. But you are no longer collapsing into the feeling. You are no longer becoming only the rage, only the fear, only the sadness. You are the container, the witness, the whole being who can hold all of it. That is integration. Consider for a moment what it means to be able to sit with a painful memory without losing yourself in it. It means you have reclaimed something. You have gone back to that moment, perhaps many times, perhaps in pieces, and brought with you the strength you didn't have then. Or you have carried love and awareness into a space that once felt abandoned. This is emotional regulation born of integration. It is not about perfection, it is about presence. You begin to notice your triggers, not as enemies, but as invitations. What once felt like betrayal now becomes an opportunity to explore trust. What once ignited shame now becomes a portal to self-acceptance. In the past, these experiences might have thrown you into spirals, days lost to self-blame, anxiety, or retreat. Now, you may still feel shaken, but you can find your ground again. You know where it is. You know how to return to yourself. This is not just healing. It is the return of your inner compass. What makes this evolution so profound is that it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in the real, raw experiences of life. It happens when someone disappoints you and you don't lash out, but instead inquire into the hurt. It happens when you feel grief surfacing unexpectedly, and instead of pushing it down, you sit with it, breathe through it, allow it to be seen. These are not small victories. These are sacred moments of self-reclamation. And let us not forget how hard-won this capacity is. Emotional regulation through integration is not a trick you learn in a book or a technique you memorize. It is forged through fire, through the willingness to look inward, to meet yourself where you've been most fractured, to listen to the voices within that you once silenced. Each time you do, you are reuniting with a piece of your soul. You are making space for more of yourself to come home. It is this wholeness that allows you to feel without disintegration. And make no mistake, The ability to feel deeply, to grieve fully, to express honestly without being shattered, that is power. That is not weakness. That is the resilience born of integration. You are no longer trying to get rid of parts of yourself. You are no longer ashamed of your own depth. Instead, you are becoming intimate with it. You are becoming someone who can stand in the middle of contradiction, in the middle of pain, and remain intact. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming whole. There will still be moments when you feel overwhelmed. There will still be days when tears fall unexpectedly or anger flares up inside you. But you will no longer fear these experiences as evidence of brokenness. You will recognize them as waves in the ocean of your being, strong, temporary, and meaningful. You will begin to trust that you can hold them. And in that trust, you will find peace, not because life is less chaotic, but because you are more integrated. And perhaps most surprisingly, you may even come to feel gratitude. Gratitude for the very emotions that once undid you, because now they speak to you. They offer insight, direction, protection. They remind you of what you care about. They reconnect you to your humanity, to feel and not flee, to respond and not react, to stand inside the full weather of your heart and know that you are safe. This is a sign that you are healing. This is a sign that you are integrating the fractured, forgotten, or exiled parts of yourself into a greater whole. And this is the beginning of becoming someone who can feel everything and still remain true. As the process of integration continues, there is another shift that unfolds, not as a single event, but as a gentle unfolding over time. You begin to notice it in quiet moments, in how you speak to yourself when no one is listening, in how you sit with your past rather than run from it. This shift is not loud or dramatic. It does not announce itself, but it is one of the most unmistakable signs that healing is taking place. You begin to treat yourself with compassion. In the early stages of your inner work, compassion may have felt like a foreign concept. Perhaps you believed it was something to be extended to others, but not to yourself. Or maybe you tried to be kind to yourself, but your inner critic was still so loud, so relentless, that kindness could not yet find space to root. You may have thought healing required discipline, control, self-correction. But now, slowly, something else begins to emerge, a tenderness. A voice within that says, yes, I see how you struggled. I see why you hurt, and I will not turn away from you anymore. This voice does not arrive from outside. It is not imposed. It is remembered. It is reclaimed. It rises from the very depths of your being, from the places that were once buried under shame, guilt, and fear. Where once you may have punished yourself for not being perfect, you now begin to hold space for your imperfections, not with indulgence, but with understanding. Not with excuses, but with truth. You begin to see the younger versions of yourself, the one who lashed out, the one who withdrew, the one who made choices out of desperation or fear, not as failures, but as fragments of you that were trying, always trying to survive. And when you look at those parts with gentleness instead of judgment, something miraculous begins to happen. They soften. They begin to trust you. The self that was hidden behind defense and denial starts to emerge, no longer afraid of being attacked. Self-compassion is not a technique. It is not something you practice mechanically. It is something you allow. It is something that naturally arises when the walls within you begin to fall, when the war against your own vulnerability comes to an end, when the story of your worth is no longer dependent on perfection, but instead rooted in your willingness to be real. At first, this new relationship with yourself may feel unfamiliar. You may even resist it. You may find yourself thinking, but I don't deserve compassion. I caused harm. I made mistakes. I failed. And yes, you did, as all humans do. Integration does not require denial of your impact. It requires that you face it fully, but without self-hatred. You begin to understand that growth comes not through shame, but through accountability grounded in love. When you can say to yourself, I see where I went wrong, and I choose to make it right, not because I hate myself, but because I care, you are healing. This shift is revolutionary. For so long, you may have believed that self-criticism was the only way to improve, the only way to keep yourself in line. But as compassion begins to take root, you realize it offers a far more sustainable path. When you are gentle with yourself, you don't collapse into laziness, you rise, you grow. You become more courageous because you are no longer afraid of falling. You know that even if you fall, you will meet yourself there with kindness. You begin to notice how your inner world reorganizes itself. That voice that once told you you were not good enough starts to lose its grip. And even when it returns, you no longer believe it so quickly. You question it. You speak back, not with aggression, but with clarity. You say, "That may have been true once, but it is no longer who I am." And in that moment you reclaim more of your own power. Self-compassion changes how you move through the world. You begin to take up space differently, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. You no longer shrink to please others or overextend to prove your worth. You begin to listen to your needs and you honor them. Not because you believe you are better than others, but because you finally recognize that you are no less than them. And when others hurt you, you respond from a different place. You don't allow mistreatment, but you also don't carry it as proof of your inadequacy. You recognize that their behavior is about them. You set boundaries, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. This is compassion too. To say to yourself, "I will not abandon you again, I will protect you, I will choose you." That is love in action. In the past, you may have seen self-love as a destination, some final state of peace and radiance. But now you begin to understand it is a daily practice, a moment-by-moment choice, a willingness to return to yourself, even when you are messy, even when you are afraid, even when you fail, especially then. Because healing is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming whole. And you cannot be whole if you are still at war with yourself. There will still be moments when the old patterns return, when the critic gets loud, when the shame creeps in, when the urge to disconnect arises, but you will notice them more quickly now. You will meet them not with fear, but with familiarity. You will say, "Ah, I know you. I see what you're trying to do, but I choose differently now." And in that choice you are free. You will also begin to extend this compassion outward, not because you are forcing it, but because it flows naturally from within. When you have learned to hold your own pain with tenderness, you can do the same for others. You become less reactive, more present. You recognize that everyone is carrying wounds, and while this does not excuse harm, it does explain behavior. It helps you respond with clarity instead of chaos. But it must begin with you. If you cannot offer kindness to yourself, all outward kindness becomes performance. It becomes hollow. True compassion cannot be faked. It must be felt. And when you feel it for yourself, when you truly look at your life, your wounds, your history, and say, "I forgive you, I understand you, I will walk with you," then you are no longer divided inside. You are integrated. To see yourself clearly and still choose love is the essence of healing. It is the return to your original dignity, not because you have earned it, but because it was always there, waiting to be remembered. And this quiet revolution of the heart is the clearest sign that you are no longer surviving, you are becoming whole. As you continue to heal, something truly remarkable begins to happen. You begin to find a sense of clarity that was once elusive. The fog that clouded your understanding of who you are and what you want starts to lift. You begin to feel for the first time in a long while that you know exactly where you stand in relation to yourself and the world around you. Your identity, once fragmented and disjointed, begins to integrate into something whole. And this clarity is not something that is imposed on you from the outside, but something that emerges from within. It is the clear, steady voice of your own true self speaking, cutting through the noise, the confusion, and the distractions. For so much of your life, perhaps you have been navigating through a haze of uncertainty, unsure of what you wanted, who you really were beneath all the roles, expectations, and judgments. You may have adopted identities that weren't truly yours simply because they were easier to wear, more acceptable to others, or more familiar. Perhaps you have played the role of someone who others expected you to be, even though it didn't fit well with your inner essence. You may have felt lost in these layers, disconnected from the core of who you truly are. But as integration takes place, something remarkable begins to shift. The roles you once wore out of necessity or fear begin to fall away. and you start to stand more firmly in the truth of who you are. You begin to feel grounded, as if your feet are finally planted firmly on the earth beneath you, and your mind and spirit are no longer scattered in 1,000 directions. The distractions that once led you away from yourself begin to lose their pull. There is a new sense of alignment, a new sense of purpose. It's as if a compass inside of you is now functioning properly, guiding you with clarity and direction. Your choices begin to align with your deepest values. Your actions begin to reflect your true beliefs, and you no longer feel pulled in conflicting directions. There is a quiet power in this newfound clarity. You begin to recognize the value of your own voice, your own inner wisdom. It is no longer drowned out by the noise of self-doubt or the influence of others. You can trust yourself again, and with that trust comes a greater understanding of what you need, what you want, and where you are headed. It's not that the road ahead is suddenly clear of challenges. Rather, the difference is that you are no longer confused about your path. You may still face obstacles, but now you approach them with a sense of purpose and confidence, knowing that they are part of your journey and not something that will derail you. In this clarity, you also begin to see your past with new eyes. Those moments of struggle, pain, and confusion no longer feel like they define you in the same way. You begin to see them as chapters in your story, valuable experiences that have shaped you, but not the final definition of who you are. You start to understand how your past, rather than holding you back, has given you the strength, resilience, and wisdom to navigate the present. You can hold your story with pride, not shame. You can see the threads that tie your experiences together, weaving a tapestry of meaning that gives you a deeper appreciation for the journey you've been on. This clarity extends beyond simply understanding who you are in the moment. It also reveals to you a sense of purpose and direction in life that was once cloudy. You begin to understand not just who you are, but where you are going. Your actions begin to take on greater meaning, and decisions become less about what is expected of you or what others might think, and more about what aligns with your soul's deepest calling. You recognize that you are no longer drifting aimlessly, but are consciously creating your life. This is not a rigid sense of control, but rather a fluid, intentional navigation through the world, guided by an inner knowing of what feels right for you. You may notice that the things you once thought you wanted, the things that seemed important in the past, no longer hold the same weight. The pursuit of external validation, approval from others, or the accumulation of things that promised happiness may lose their shine. Instead, you start to feel the pull toward things that nourish your soul, things that reflect your truest self. The path you once thought you were supposed to follow begins to fade into the background, and you step onto the path that is uniquely yours. As this clarity deepens, you begin to understand that your true self is not defined by any one achievement, role, or expectation. Instead, you recognize that you are a constantly evolving being, with the capacity for growth, change, and expansion. Your identity is no longer a static thing, but a living, breathing expression of your inner truth, which can shift and transform as you continue to grow. The pressure to figure it all out, or to become something, begins to ease. Instead of trying to live up to an image of who you think you should be, you begin to relax into the understanding that you are already enough, just as you are, and that your true self will continue to reveal itself in its own time. There is a sense of peace in this clarity, a deep relief in no longer feeling torn between different versions of yourself, no longer feeling divided between who you are and who you think you should be. It is a kind of homecoming, a return to your essence. As the layers of confusion and self-doubt peel away, what remains is the simple truth of who you are, untethered from the expectations of the past and the pressures of the future. You begin to trust the process of becoming, and instead of fighting it, you embrace it with open arms. This clarity also manifests in your relationships. You no longer feel the need to hide pieces of yourself to fit in. You no longer feel compelled to play roles that others expect of you. You begin to show up more authentically, more fully. Your boundaries become clearer, not out of defensiveness, but out of respect for yourself. You understand that the people who truly belong in your life will appreciate you for who you are, and you are no longer willing to settle for anything less. Your relationships become more genuine because you are more genuine. You no longer need to prove yourself or seek validation from others. Instead, you simply show up as yourself, trusting that you are enough. And in the stillness of this clarity, you begin to notice that you are able to make decisions with greater ease. Choices that once felt overwhelming or paralyzing now come more naturally. You are no longer trying to please others or mold yourself into what you think is expected. You know what feels right for you, and you trust yourself to make the choices that align with your truth. It is not about perfection or never making mistakes. It is about trusting yourself enough to take action, to move forward, and to live your life in alignment with your true desires. Ultimately, this clarity is the embodiment of integration itself. It is the result of reconciling the various parts of yourself that were once at odds. It is the alignment of your inner and outer worlds, of your mind, body, and spirit. It is the realization that you are whole, complete, and capable of living a life that reflects your true self. It is the knowing that you do not need to seek approval or validation from the outside because you have already found it within. And as this clarity continues to deepen, you will find that your life unfolds with more ease, more joy, and more purpose, because you are no longer fighting against yourself. You are finally living in alignment with your deepest truth. As we move deeper into the process of healing, we begin to notice something incredibly important. The constant internal conflict that once dominated our thoughts, our emotions, and our decisions begins to quiet. It's as if a storm that has raged within us for years is finally beginning to subside, leaving in its wake a calm that feels like a gentle peace. The inner turmoil, the wrestling between opposing parts of yourself, the incessant tug-of-war between what you want and what you think you should want starts to fade. The battles that once felt endless, where you fought to be someone you were not, to meet impossible standards, or to reconcile your desires with your obligations, begin to dissolve, and in their place there is an unusual stillness, a sense of harmony within that was once unimaginable. This reduction in inner conflict is a profound marker of healing. It doesn't mean that you no longer experience difficult emotions, nor does it mean that you no longer struggle with life's challenges. Rather, it signifies that you have come to a place where the war within yourself is no longer waged. The opposing forces within you begin to find a way to coexist, to find common ground, and, as a result, you begin to move through life with a quieter, steadier sense of self. For so long we have been taught to view ourselves through a lens of division, good versus bad, strong versus weak, successful versus unsuccessful. These distinctions are so ingrained in our consciousness that we start to believe we must be one thing or the other. We must be perfect, we must be happy, we must be good, or else we are something less. And this belief system creates a deep internal rift, where parts of ourselves are constantly at odds. The inner critic berates us for not living up to our potential, while the wounded parts of us seek comfort, understanding, and compassion. The innocent part of us yearns to be loved and accepted, while the fearful part strives to protect us from pain by keeping us small. The perfectionist wants us to achieve, while the exhausted part wants rest and peace. The tension between these conflicting desires creates a profound internal struggle. It is exhausting, and it often leaves us feeling disconnected, unsure of who we truly are or what we truly want. We may spend years trying to resolve this inner discord, chasing a version of ourselves that is not authentic, or even pretending to be someone we are not, simply to avoid the pain of inner conflict. But as healing through integration takes place, this conflict begins to ease. Slowly, the voices that once shouted for your attention, the voices of judgment, guilt, fear, and insecurity, begin to soften. It's not that they disappear. Those parts of ourselves are always there, but they no longer rule the day. Instead, there is a growing acceptance that all these parts, even the ones we once viewed as enemies, have something important to teach us. The perfectionist, the critic, the fear-driven part, they are not villains to be destroyed. Rather, they are voices that have evolved to protect us, to guide us, but they don't need to dominate us. You start to realize that the answer is not to fight these voices or repress them. The answer is to listen without judgment, to understand their origins, and to gently guide them toward more balanced expressions. The perfectionist doesn't need to disappear, but it needs to soften. It needs to understand that perfection is an illusion, that mistakes are part of the journey, and that failure is not the end, but a new beginning. The inner critic doesn't need to be silenced, but it needs to be heard from a place of compassion, to understand that you are not defined by your shortcomings. The fearful part of you doesn't need to be eradicated, but it needs to be reassured that it is safe to let go, that it is safe to step into the unknown because you are no longer alone. This process of integration is not about eliminating or denying the parts of ourselves we have long rejected. It is about accepting all of who we are, including the shadows, the wounded parts, the parts we might have once considered unworthy or unacceptable. It is about understanding that these aspects of ourselves are not enemies, but teachers that, when listened to with patience and empathy, can help us evolve into more complete versions of ourselves. The reduction in inner conflict doesn't mean you no longer feel anxiety, doubt, or fear. It simply means you no longer fight those emotions as if they are threats. Instead, you welcome them as messengers. The fear that once paralyzed you becomes a signal to pay attention, to be cautious, to take your time. The anxiety that once spiraled into overwhelming dread now serves as an invitation to slow down, to check in with yourself, to understand the deeper concerns beneath the surface. You start to understand that these emotions, when integrated, are not to be feared or avoided. They are just part of the human experience, and they have value. You can still honor them while not allowing them to control you. In this way, the inner conflict gives way to a new kind of peace, a peace that is not born from the absence of challenges or difficulties, but from the acceptance of all that you are. You begin to realize that peace is not something that is won after years of struggle. It is something that exists inside you, waiting to be discovered. It is the quiet recognition that in your full complexity you are enough. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to live up to unrealistic standards. And you do not need to silence parts of yourself in order to feel whole. This reduction in inner conflict also shifts how you engage with the world around you. You no longer carry the weight of unresolved tension into your relationships or your work. You begin to approach others with a sense of calm, because you no longer see them as threats or challenges to be conquered. Your interactions become more genuine, more authentic, because you are no longer trying to prove something to others or avoid being exposed. You simply show up as you are, imperfections, fears, and all, and you realize that this is enough. This newfound peace within yourself allows you to step into the world with greater confidence, because you no longer feel the need to fight for your place or defend your worth. You know that you belong simply because you are here, and you no longer seek validation from others in the same way. You no longer feel the need to prove yourself, because you have already made peace with who you are. This inner calm shifts your energy, and as a result, you find that others begin to respond to you differently. They feel your peace, your acceptance, and they begin to mirror it back to you. This is not magic. This is the natural result of inner integration. When you are at peace with yourself, the world around you begins to reflect that peace. In this place of inner harmony, you also begin to see life through a new lens. The struggles, the challenges, the obstacles, none of them disappear, but they no longer seem insurmountable. They are simply part of the journey. They are opportunities for growth, for learning, and for self-expression. You no longer feel defeated by them. Instead, you feel empowered to face them head-on, knowing that you are equipped with the wisdom, strength, and resilience that you've gained through the integration process. You begin to understand that the inner war was never truly necessary. You don't need to fight yourself, you don't need to force parts of you to change, and you don't need to hide from your vulnerabilities. All of these parts, your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, your desires, are simply pieces of the whole that make you who you are. And when they come together in harmony, you realize that there is no need to be at war with yourself. The greatest victory, it turns out, is not overcoming your inner conflict. It is learning to embrace it, to allow it to coexist, to allow yourself to be whole. And in that acceptance, you find peace. As we progress on this journey of healing, we come to understand something truly remarkable. It is as if the pieces of our life once scattered and disconnected, begin to fall into place. The fragmented parts of ourselves, the parts that we once thought were beyond repair or understanding, begin to align with a sense of unity. We no longer see ourselves as broken, as something needing to be fixed. Instead, we begin to recognize that we are whole, even in our imperfections, and the healing process reveals this wholeness. We begin to experience a deeper connection with our authentic self, a self that was always there but perhaps obscured by the layers of pain, fear, and conditioning that once clouded our vision. This alignment doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, it takes patience. But as we heal, we start to feel an increasing sense of integration. The disjointed parts of ourselves, our past experiences, our desires, our beliefs, begin to fit together, not as separate competing forces, but as integral components of a larger, coherent whole. It's as if the fragmented puzzle pieces of our life, once scattered across time and space, begin to align to reveal a picture that is uniquely ours. This alignment, this coming together of our inner world, reflects a deep and profound integration of self. The parts of us that once felt distant or disconnected, our past wounds, our unspoken fears, our hidden desires, begin to weave together into a unified tapestry. And this unity does not come with the erasure of our struggles or the negation of our past. Instead, it emerges from the understanding that all of our experiences, even the painful ones, are valid and valuable. They are the threads that form the fabric of our being, the experiences that shaped us into who we are today. We come to see our past not as a source of shame or regret, but as an essential part of our story, one that has brought us to this point of growth and understanding. The healing process, in essence, is the journey of reclaiming these fragmented pieces of ourselves, of bringing them together into a harmonious whole. We begin to recognize that we do not need to compartmentalize our lives, to separate the good from the bad, or to reject parts of ourselves in order to be worthy. Instead, we come to embrace the full spectrum of our experience, the joy and the sorrow, the strength and the vulnerability, the light and the shadow. These are not opposing forces, but complementary parts of the human condition. And when we accept them all, when we allow them to coexist within us, we begin to experience the deep alignment that comes with true healing. This alignment also means that we begin to recognize and trust our inner wisdom more fully. As the various parts of ourselves come into greater harmony, our intuition, the quiet voice within us that speaks from the heart, becomes more distinct. No longer drowned out by the noise of inner conflict or external pressure, our intuition rises to the surface, guiding us with a clarity we may have once lacked. We learn to listen to this voice, to trust it, and to act from a place of inner knowing rather than from fear or doubt. This intuitive guidance is not something mystical or unattainable. It is simply the wisdom that arises from a life fully lived, from the integration of our experiences, and from the deep understanding that we are more than our thoughts or emotions. We are a whole being, connected to the greater fabric of life. And when we align with this inner wisdom, we find that our choices, our actions, and our relationships become more purposeful and fulfilling. As we continue to heal, we also begin to recognize the interconnectedness of all things. No longer feeling separate or isolated, we see ourselves as part of a larger web of existence. We begin to understand that we are not isolated beings navigating life alone, but rather integral parts of a greater whole. This understanding brings with it a profound sense of peace as we recognize that we are held within something far greater than ourselves, a vast interconnected web of relationships, experiences, and energies that bind us all together. This recognition allows us to release the need to control, to grasp, or to resist. Instead, we begin to flow with life, trusting that everything unfolds in its own time and that we are exactly where we need to be. The sense of alignment that comes with integration also allows us to let go of the need for external validation. For so long, we may have sought approval from others, attempting to measure our worth based on their opinions or judgments. But as we heal, we realize that our worth is inherent. It does not depend on the approval of others. We come to understand that we are enough just as we are, And this recognition frees us from the constant pressure to prove ourselves or meet the expectations of those around us. We no longer feel the need to be someone we are not, or to put on a facade to gain acceptance. Instead, we show up authentically, trusting that those who resonate with our true self will find their way to us. This alignment also brings a sense of purpose into our lives. When we begin to heal, we start to see more clearly what truly matters to us. We no longer feel pulled in 1,000 different directions, nor do we feel the need to chase after things that don't align with our core values. Our priorities become clearer, and we begin to live more intentionally. We know what we want, what we need, and what we can give, and this clarity allows us to make decisions that reflect our true desires. We are no longer swayed by the expectations of others or the pressure to conform to societal norms. Instead, we move through the world with a sense of purpose, knowing that we are living in alignment with our deepest truths. And perhaps one of the most profound shifts that comes with this alignment is the deep sense of inner peace. As we integrate all the parts of ourselves, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, the strength and the vulnerability, we come to experience a deep peace that resides within us. This peace is not a fleeting moment of calm in the midst of chaos, but a steady presence that anchors us no matter what is happening around us. It is a peace that arises from the understanding that we are whole, that we are enough, and that we do not need to strive or struggle to be complete. We are already whole, and this recognition allows us to live our lives with a quiet confidence that does not rely on external circumstances. In this sense, alignment is the natural result of healing. It is not something we have to force or manufacture, but rather something that emerges when we allow ourselves to fully embrace all that we are. As we heal, we naturally begin to move toward greater alignment with our authentic selves, with our inner wisdom, and with the world around us. We no longer feel disconnected or torn between different aspects of ourselves. Instead, we come to experience a sense of unity and wholeness that permeates every aspect of our lives. This journey of alignment, of coming home to ourselves, is not always easy, nor is it always linear. There will be moments of doubt, moments when we feel lost or uncertain. But these moments are part of the process. They are the opportunities for further growth and integration. And as we continue on this journey, we find that the sense of alignment we seek is already within us, waiting to be discovered. It is the natural result of embracing our wholeness, of accepting all parts of ourselves, and of trusting that we are exactly where we need to be. As we reach the final stage of this journey through healing, we come to understand something that, while perhaps elusive at first, becomes increasingly apparent as we walk the path of integration, the sense of connectedness, not just to ourselves, but to the world around us. This connection, which was once clouded by inner turmoil and a fragmented sense of self, begins to reveal itself as an undeniable truth. It is as if in the process of healing, we shed the layers that once separated us from others, from life itself. We begin to experience a profound sense of unity with the world around us, a sense of belonging that transcends time, place, and circumstance. In the beginning, we might feel as though we are separate beings, isolated from others by our thoughts, our emotions, and our experiences. We are taught in many ways to see ourselves as individual, distinct entities, isolated from the greater whole. We learn to focus on ourselves, to look inward for answers, and to seek out ways to improve or fix what is broken within us. And while this journey of self-awareness and self-improvement is essential, there comes a point when we realize that the ultimate answer does not lie within us alone. It lies in the recognition of our connection to everything and everyone around us. This realization is not a sudden epiphany, nor is it a fleeting moment of insight. It is something that gradually emerges as we heal, something that grows from the steady integration of all the parts of ourselves. The more we come to terms with our own complexity, the more we begin to see the same complexity reflected in the world around us. We begin to understand that we are not separate from the world, we are deeply intertwined with it. Our experiences, our thoughts, our emotions, they are not isolated events, but part of a much larger, interconnected web of life. As we heal, we start to notice that the barriers we once placed between ourselves and others begin to dissolve. The walls we built to protect ourselves from pain, rejection, and hurt start to fade. We no longer see others as threats, as obstacles to our happiness, or as competitors in the race of life. Instead, we begin to see them as fellow travelers on the same journey, each of us navigating the complexities of existence in our own way. The judgment, the fear, and the separation that once defined our relationships begin to soften. We begin to approach others with empathy and understanding, recognizing that they too are living with their own wounds, their own struggles, and their own desires for connection. This sense of interconnectedness also brings with it a deep sense of compassion. As we integrate our own experiences, we develop a greater capacity for compassion toward others. We no longer judge others for their imperfections or flaws, for we recognize them as simply part of the human experience. We understand that we are all vulnerable, all fragile in our own ways. This realization allows us to approach others with kindness, with patience, and with a deep sense of respect. We no longer feel the need to protect ourselves from the vulnerabilities of others, for we see in them a reflection of our own humanity. Furthermore, this sense of connectedness extends beyond just our relationships with others. It reaches into our connection with the natural world, with the environment, and with the greater forces that shape our lives. We begin to recognize that we are not isolated beings moving through a world of objects and events. We are part of a vast, living organism, connected to the earth, the sky, the stars, and all the creatures that inhabit this planet. We begin to feel a deep sense of responsibility for the world around us, a responsibility not born out of obligation, but out of a deep understanding that we are all in this, together. The well-being of the earth, the animals, and future generations is not something separate from our own well-being. It is something deeply intertwined with it. In this newfound connection to the world, we also begin to feel a sense of trust. Trust that life is unfolding as it should, that we are not alone in our struggles, and that there is a greater plan at work. This trust does not come from an intellectual understanding or a belief in a particular outcome. It comes from the deep knowing that, as we heal and integrate, we become more attuned to the rhythms of life, to the ebb and flow of existence. We begin to understand that there are cycles of growth, of rest, of renewal, and of decay, and in each of these cycles there is meaning, there is purpose, there is connection. As we continue to heal, we may find that our relationships with others transform in profound ways. We no longer seek out relationships based on need or insecurity. We no longer feel the need to fill an emptiness within ourselves by seeking approval, validation, or love from others. Instead, we approach relationships from a place of wholeness, knowing that we are already complete. We no longer expect others to complete us, nor do we feel the weight of expectation that we must complete others. Our relationships become more genuine, more balanced, and more nourishing because we are no longer looking to them to provide us with something we have not already found within ourselves. This healing, this integration, allows us to experience a deeper, more meaningful connection to the world. We begin to see beauty in the ordinary, in the small moments of life that we once overlooked. The way the sunlight dances on the water, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, the laughter of a child, all of these moments take on new significance. They are no longer just fleeting occurrences. They are reminders of the deep interconnectedness of life, of the web that binds us all together. We also begin to feel a deeper sense of purpose in our actions. The work we do, the way we spend our time, the way we engage with others, it all begins to feel more aligned with who we truly are. No longer driven by the need for approval or validation, we are guided by a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. We begin to act from a place of integrity, of authenticity, and of service. We understand that our actions ripple out into the world, affecting those around us in ways we may never fully understand. But we also understand that these ripples are part of a greater current, a current that connects us all. The healing process, in essence, brings us into deeper connection with the world and with the people around us. teaches us that we are not isolated beings struggling to survive, but part of a larger, living, breathing universe that is constantly evolving. We are connected to one another, to the earth, to the stars, and to the infinite web of life that surrounds us. And when we recognize this, when we truly understand our place within this web, we begin to experience life with a sense of gratitude, of reverence, and of peace. This sense of connectedness does not mean that life becomes easier, or that we no longer face challenges. On the contrary, we will continue to encounter obstacles, losses, and hardships. But in the face of these challenges, we no longer feel alone. We no longer feel that we are fighting against the world. Instead, we feel supported by it, held within the embrace of something greater than ourselves. This sense of connectedness gives us the strength to persevere, to continue moving forward, knowing that we are part of a larger story, a story that is still unfolding. Ultimately, the healing journey brings us to the realization that we are not separate from the world, but an integral part of it. This recognition allows us to live more fully, more authentically, and with a greater sense of peace. It is a peace born not of isolation, but of connection, a peace that comes from knowing that we are part of something much greater than ourselves. And in this understanding, we find the courage to embrace life fully with all its beauty, its pain, and its mystery.